Chasing the Mind, podcast number 12. Stop and Think with Michael Schaffer. Welcome to Chasing the Mind, hosted by Dr. Angela Johnson and Dr. Stephanie Schwartz, the podcast that explores the art and science of the mind. Each episode, we will feature a topic or guest who offers a unique perspective in answering the following questions. How do our thoughts influence our sense of who we are? How do we impact the world around us? And can changing our minds change everything? Today on Chasing the Mind, Dr. Angela and Dr. Stephanie interview Michael Schaffer, host and creator of the Reasonable Risk podcast, about how to analyze information and make better decisions.
I really advise people that if they're ever going to be playing for money, never play for no money.
But first, the doctors explore the hidden meanings in Halloween costumes. Sexy pizza, anyone?
I mean, first of all, pizza is sexy all on its own. It doesn't need to be short and tight. Who doesn't love pizza? Well, people don't. Whatever.
Hey there, it is October, and thank you for listening to Chasing the Mind. I'm Dr. Angela.
And I'm Dr. Stephanie.
And like I said, it's the first day of October.
This is exciting because we recently had the beginning of fall, and that's always exciting. And it's also the start of Halloween season.
Wow. Although doesn't that really start in July now at Target, pretty much?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is actually fine with me. It's like the one holiday that if it starts early, hey, I'm all good.
So Halloween, and we actually started decorating a little bit here already, getting ahead of the curve. We have a big, huge, hairy spider hanging right outside our door.
I'm wondering if actually you should post a picture.
Oh, maybe. It's funny because when Graham put it up there, he kept alternating between wanting people to be scared and not wanting them to be scared when they came in. It just kind of shows preschool to kindergarten age ambivalence about things, but that's a whole other topic.
Well, actually, I mean, with Halloween, I think there is ambivalence. Is it like a lot of times, yes, it's supposed to be a creepy holiday. It started with the All Hallows Eve religious thing, but there's a lot of not creepiness. There's just, the dressing up as your alter ego, which may or may not be creepy. So I think Halloween is a little, scary and not scary.
So Dr. Stephanie and I were talking about sort of the first thing about Halloween, and of course, costumes, I think, come to mind because I have already gotten Graham his costume. He wanted to be Darth Vader.
Which is scary.
And if you go to the Disney store, which is also scary for your credit card, but that's a whole other thing. And so since he wanted to be Darth Vader, I have decided that little Daniel is going to be Yoda.
I love Yoda. I mean, Yoda is just one of my favorite characters ever. He's sort of so wise, but kind of approachable and adorable. He's a puppet.
He's funny.
And
kind of a smart ass.
He is.
So there's that too. But anyway, I don't know if that actually fits Daniel's ego or alter ego, but it is nonetheless, because he is cute and little, that he will be Yoda. And I did sort of tease my husband about whether we should go full out family Star Wars, and I could be Princess Leia and he could be Luke Skywalker. And he kind of gave me a funny look, which I'm going to interpret as, please go spend money and buy those costumes.
Awesome. So which iteration of Leia would you be? Would you be like cinnamon bun, white gown? I mean, it's New England, so New England at the end of October isn't necessarily metal bra season.
Okay, well, it doesn't really matter like what Leia I was going to be. I was never going to be the bikini Leia because that's just not going to happen. I don't know. I mean, I'm a little bit older. Maybe I'll go more the general Leia.
Oh, cool.
But then he has to be Han, which is actually way sexier. So we could do that.
Wow.
Now we're off topic, but in my mind,
we're not.
We're somewhere. Well, okay, that's part of the whole costume too thing, the whole sexy costume thing.
What is it with, everything for women, every costume for women needing to be sexy, like sexy piece of pizza? Like, I have seen that costume.
Oh my God, that's hysterical.
I mean, first of all, pizza is sexy all on its own. It doesn't need to be short and tight. Who doesn't love pizza? Well, people don't. Whatever. Comment below if you don't like pizza or if you do.
I'm not a big pizza fan, but I don't need to see it be sexy either. No, I think and maybe this is the larger question that we wanted to talk about, which is there are theories about costumes. One theory is that the costume reflects your either idolized self, some sort of imagined best self, kind of, you kind of go the superhero route or whatever. There's also the idea that you sort of pick costumes based on your repressed self, which I have a great story about that. Or the idea that you pick a complete opposite to your current self. So which is it? It might be any of them or all of them. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't decided what I'm dressing up as this year. I know that for school I'm wearing blue lipstick.
So you're going as a Smurf or a dead person?
I think I'm going as a person who's trying to be cool, which might be my costume every day. I'm going as a person who is cool. I don't know.
So it's your idealized...
My idealized...
Your idealized self.
Yeah, it's a very popular color. It's squid ink, if anyone's heard of that lipstick color.
Okay. So do you think that people pick costumes based on what they want to be, what they repress, or the opposite of who they are?
I think many different people, as you said, do different things. I mean, I think it's interesting. Like, we have a good friend, Eric, who doesn't necessarily dress up for Halloween, but when you talk to him about what superhero he wants to be, it tells you so much about him. He wants to be the good guys. His two favorites are Captain America and Superman. I mean...
Very straight-laced.
Very straight-laced, the good guys. I mean, Captain America is such a good guy that he moved Thor's hammer. Like, he made it wobble. And you have to be pretty worthy to move Mjolnir even a little bit.
Yeah, so Eric is good lawful. I mean, that's just who Eric is.
Yeah, he's never gonna want to be Darth Vader like Graham is, you know?
Yeah. No, and it's funny because when I think of this other person that I know who one year I was babysitting her kids, it was many years ago, and they were going to a costume party and I'm over there and I'm hanging out with the kids, and this woman was a very uptight kind of, very straight-laced person. And she came down, and I think she was like a Puritan or a Quaker or something, like the bonnet, the whole thing. And I'm like, wow. And I'd had zero psychology classes at this point, but even I was like, huh. And the unconscious becomes conscious, It's like pretty stark here.
I have never seen anyone dress up as a Puritan.
Completely the bonnet, the apron, the whole thing. I mean, if she been carrying a stake to go after witches, it would have just been it would have finished the costume. But yeah, so I'm like, for her, that's really kind of who she is. But it's also, I think, I don't know if you asked her, are you sort of this repressed, uptight person? She'd be like, oh, no, I'm not like that at all. And yet she picks that for a costume. And then on the other hand, I know people who have done the whole pregnant nun thing or slutty nun or whatever. So they're doing
slutty nun because the world needs that.
The world needs slutty nuns. No, I mean, so it's does the costume come from the person? Or, I mean, I think the whole sexy costume thing, is that how women want to portray themselves? Or is that how, society wants women to be portrayed in every iteration of dress up?
I mean, I think sexy costumes are great if a woman wants to dress up as something sexy. But I think there should be options. I mean, the whole thing where you go to the costume store or the Halloween store and that's the only option, that's the problem. If the woman is making a choice among many, then hey, go out there and be a slutty piece of bacon or whatever it is. I have seen that. Don't laugh.
Bacon is sexy all by itself. It doesn't need any help.
That's true. But dressing up as something slutty in a context of that's the only choice, that's where it gets to be problematic and ooky, frankly.
Yeah, no, and there's a thing that's, comes out every Halloween too about kids and choices and how the choices are always so gendered, and that's not necessarily good for kids either. They should be able, little girls should be able to be Barbie princesses, and they should be able to be construction workers. Like, it's totally fine. And little boys, if they want to be, sparkly fairies with sparkly fairy wings, or they want to be a policeman, or they want to be, a rock, it's fine. Like, it's play. It's dress up. It's fun. It's make believe. Who cares?
Yeah, and the fact that there's also value. Like, for instance, I'm just thinking, like, when you go to the store and the one that's marketed at boys is a doctor and the one that's marketed at girls is a nurse.
Correct.
And it's like men and women can be nurses.
Right.
And men and women can be doctors.
Right.
And that piece is problematic. But I think this is why, I think a lot of people might have seen the picture where there was Princess Day at some dance class, and then there's one little girl who dressed up as a hot dog, and it just went totally viral because everybody's like, go hot dog princess. Like, she wasn't even really dressed up as a hot dog princess, like pretty. She was just like, that girl was a hot dog, and it was awesome.
Maybe her idea of royalty is through the administration of pork products. Like, that is just who she is.
But she was being who she was. Like, there was just this whole parade of little princesses. And if that's what they want to be, that's great. Be a sparkly princess. But she was having none of it. And she was going to be that hot dog.
Yeah, no, and there's been posts like that too about like little girls who've dressed up as princesses and their dads have too, or little boys who want to dress up as princesses, and that's seen as being, hey, it's a role, it's play, it's not a statement of someone's continuous and set identity. Most of us who dress up as princesses can go to work the next day fully aware that we are no longer a princess and can't rule anything. We're good. So, yeah, this idea that, if kids pick something, that means something.
Right.
Is kind of,
Oh my God, the boy likes pink. He is absolutely not heterosexual. Like, come on.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's a whole other thing where people freak out about kids' choices in play and like what that means for their 40-year-old selves, which is, I mean, maybe it has some implication. I mean, there's certainly been studies done on gender identity and sexuality that have indicated that there may have been some things in childhood that were suggestive of, maybe adopting more play or something of the other gender when they were younger, but that's retrospective. So, how much does it tell you? I mean, there's probably like 50 kids who do that. And like, the normal percentage of, kids who go on to have not cisgender, not, heterosexual orientation, well, maybe they look back and they have that too. Doesn't really mean anything, not predictive.
Right. And also, how much were kids allowed the room to play with what they wanted to play?
Right.
And be who they wanted to be. I mean, like, people do put a little too much stock in what kids do early. Like, oh my God, they walked a month before the average. They're going to be a genius. Like, no, they just walked early.
Right. Yeah, no, so I think, so for the like my kids, well, Daniel doesn't get to pick this year, but Graham's always gotten to basically pick what he wants to be, I think. It's hard because he never can make any decisions about anything. We had to circle the Disney store, like, I think 5 times before it was like he kept changing his mind.
Oh, what were some of the other things he wanted?
He liked, well, Cars is big right now because the movie came out. And so he was, looking at the Cars outfit, and then he kind of liked Spider-Man. He thought about
Okay, let me interrupt you. He also just likes vehicles and modes of transportation.
Oh my God, yes. Yeah, he does.
Like, I've gotten texts from him when adults give him a phone, and he just texts me a string of 20 emoji, and most of them are vehicles.
Yeah, he loves some cars. So, no, I think that with the Darth Vader, I think he wanted to be something dark. He wanted to be something scary, and he really liked the lightsaber. Like, those are the things that kind of called that decision for him. The year before that, he was Buzz Lightyear. And again, it had wings. It had wings that lit up, and it had a helmet that lit up. So shiny. So that was kind of what sealed that deal. So, the things that kids like. That's why it's so funny to me when people, again, freak out about the sparkly fairy princess stuff with boys. I'm like, it's shiny. It like glitters. Like, who doesn't like that? That has nothing to do with anything. It's just like, it's like all kids love glitter. It just has nothing to do with anything. you know?
It's true.
Ask any kindergarten teacher how much glitter they go through.
I mean, it's interesting. I'm thinking back also to my adolescent self, and like some of the costumes that I chose do say something about me. Like I went for these sort of more abstract kind of costumes. Like one year I went as fire. One year I went as water. One year I went as a tap dancing musical note. And I think these were all junior high and high school.
You spent a lot of time thinking about these things. See, I was like, grab stuff from my closet, slap on some makeup, call myself something, and just go get candy.
To be fair, the water costume was sort of a flowy blue dress, and maybe some blue makeup or something, and then a water bottle I could spray on people, which might have been. So I really like water, but there was probably a dark side to it in that I was like, I can spray people with this water bottle.
Yeah, so for our listeners, if you want to tell us what your costumes are going to be this year, and if you think that represents your idealized self or something you've repressed,
or a darker side,
your alter ego, yeah, let us know on our Facebook page or tweet to us. But speaking of things I've been kind of putting out there, one of the things I put on Facebook this week was about if you had the ability to have a superpower for 24 hours, what would you pick? And we got some really interesting responses from listeners.
I thought this was fascinating, actually.
Yeah, so we got time travel, invisibility. One person wanted to be able to get like twice the amount of sleep in like, half the time kind of thing, which I thought was brilliant. One person said super speed, mind control.
Mind control is a little creepy to me. Like, I don't know if anybody's seen Jessica Jones. I know you haven't seen it yet. Because I won't spoil it. But mind control gets creepy fast.
Yeah, no, it'd be interesting to know what that was about. Another one was just being able to manipulate time. So I guess slow it down, speed it up, depending on what's going on. Like speed it up during the boring parts, I guess. And
there was a movie about that, an Adam Sandler movie, where he got a remote control. I mean, I'm not a fan of Adam Sandler movies, but this one, he gets this remote control and he speeds life up during the boring parts and slows it down. But he starts to it had a moral. It's like he starts to miss most of his life.
Right.
You didn't see that?
No, but I think I've heard a story like that once. So,
and he all of a sudden he sort of wakes up and he's like old because all the parts that he originally thought were boring were what life is about.
Yeah, no, this was actually read to the kids during like kids story time at my church. So now I remember. Now the story is making sense. So I don't know what it's based on, but at our we go to Universal Unitarian Church, and they have a little part where the religious education teacher reads a story for the kids. But really, I think it's all she's just trying to tell us something. So yeah, that was the story she told the kids about. That this person realized that you have to slow down and appreciate everything because otherwise you'll miss most of your life.
It's true.
And life is kind of boring too. You better get that, kiddos. And some other things were kinetic abilities, ability to move things around. Somebody wished for a health issue to be resolved.
Yeah.
So magic health powers. So I don't know what I would pick, actually.
You don't? Oh, I've had this picked for like years. Like, one thing I thought was really interesting was that no one picked what I thought would be the go-to one, which is I want to be able to fly. Because first of all, I think it would be cool to fly. Like, I think it would be like gorgeous to like soar and, just the feeling of the wind. But also I would be able to visit people that are far away because I could just fly there. And so it has both the sort of aesthetic aspect of like, how great would it feel to be flying and see things from a different perspective, but also I'd get to see people far away. It's kind of like a 2-in-1 for me. And so it seems really obvious, like, boy, that's a great power. No one picked it. And in fact, some people picked things that I thought were, I don't know, like things I would never want, like being invisible. Like, I don't want to know what's going on when I'm not there. I don't want to know what people are saying about me when I'm not there. I don't really understand the invisible thing. Like, I mean, I've even seen like, I don't know, science fiction things, and it just always seems to turn out not that well.
Well, that's the thing with all these superpowers or all these things is that if you read books or you see movies, they're always the negative. Like nobody ever goes back in time and, keeps JFK from getting assassinated and it turns out well. But that's because it's a book and a story. And if it turned out well, then like nobody's going to read it because then it's boring because we don't like happy endings. Real literature has to be tragic and horrible. So so that's the problem. Invisibility, time travel, all of these things have been portrayed as being, they're going to ruin everything. If you go back and change a butterfly wing, then we're all going to die.
Yeah, that's why I wish people had given us a little more specificity, because if you want to go back in time to change things, I find that really problematic. But if you want to go back in time because you just want to see someone again that you can't see, that totally makes sense. Like, you're not trying to change anything. You're just really miss someone or something, and you want to go back and see it.
I don't know. See, I think if I could go back in time, we wouldn't have the current political situation we have right now. I don't know. I mean, I think that's why people want to go back. They want to change things. They don't like the way things are now. So I don't know. That's why it's hard to pick one for me, because I'm like, all the ones that I like are really supposedly a problem. The thing about being invisible is you could kind of like, you could manipulate things without anybody knowing, right?
Like what?
Well, like, trip somebody maybe, have them fall on their face off a cliff. Or I don't know. I'm thinking out loud,
I'm just thinking out loud, folks, and I'm going to like have someone be falling off a cliff.
No, I don't know. People always like the example of walking into a bank, which, see, again, like the idea of theft, like not so much appealing. I think really that's the thing, is that a lot of these superpowers, at least some of them, have to do with power and wealth and all that. And it's like, that's really the superpower that is in our world. If you have a ton of money,
that is a superpower.
That's your superpower, right? And if there's even like a joke in like the new movie, right, with the new DC movie that's going to come out, Justice League, where someone turns to Batman and says, "What's your superpower?" And he's like, "I'm rich." And it's like, yeah, that's actually a superpower in this day and age. If you can influence things with your money, guess what? You get to exert a lot of power.
Interesting. I have actually told someone I know that their superpower is quote unquote snit, which is a combination of snark and wit, which I think actually could almost apply to you as well, Dr. Angela.
Almost. I almost have a superpower.
Well, I mean, I came up with it for another person, but I think it could apply to you as well. But this person is just really funny and sometimes really snarky. Yeah, no, actually it applies to you. Yeah. But I think it's a great superpower. I mean, they were sort of insulted when I first said it. And then I was like, oh no, like, you know me. Why would you think that would be an insult? I consider that like a serious compliment.
Okay, so what superhero would you be? We already know that our friend would be good lawful, and so he'd be Captain America. My husband would be Batman because he loves gadgets, and he just wants to have all the gadgets.
What superhero would I want to be? I mean, first of all, it's hard because there's not that many women to choose from.
So gender neutral it.
Yeah, but still, I do kind of like Black Widow. I think she's really funny. God, she had a dark childhood though, so that's kind of sad. But she's very, she has a lot of certain types of physical prowess that I happen to not have. Like, she can flip and twist and do all kinds of cool stuff. But she's also really funny. I mean, I'm thinking of that scene where she's like, I'm interrogating someone right now. And the person she's interrogating thinks he's interrogating her. Mm-hmm. And it's quite funny. Who can fly?
Superman.
Yeah, but with a cape and...
No capes.
No capes! For those of you who have seen The Incredibles. I'm not sure I've ever... It's interesting because I'm absolutely crystal clear sure on what superpower I want. But superhero, I haven't thought about that much. yeah, Tony Stark is really rich and he has that great suit that can fly.
That's true.
Oh, but he's
I
such
think
a
about-
jerk. He is a narcissistic.
But he's a traumatized narcissist, and that's like for another.
We are going to address
show.
that.
But no, I think actually that's probably more like what I would want to be.
Tony Stark?
Yeah, Iron Man, Tony Stark. I'd want everyone to like come to my press conferences and listen to what I have to say and have the government beg me for stuff so that I could exert some power. And, have a really cool suit where you could fly. And
he's really smart too, actually.
And actually, in a lot of ways, despite the fact he is somewhat narcissistically oriented, he works very hard to try to create cooperation and committee on the part of the Avengers. Like, he kind of goes that direction. He has some ability to recognize where they've made mistakes.
I'm thinking of that scene where he brings Pepper Potts strawberries and she's like, I'm deathly allergic to strawberries, and he's like, but see, this is progress. I remembered that there was an association between you and strawberries. And she just is like, get out.
Okay, I don't want to actually be Tony Stark. I just want to like have that kind of like wealth and power and that suit. How about that?
Yeah, no, I can I identify with that as well.
But that's where my mind goes, folks.
I think that happens to both of us a lot. Like, we say things and people look at us and go, huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we have a podcast, so we can say these things.
Yeah, and then maybe people will listen. Although actually a lot of people have been listening, and we're very, very grateful for that.
We are.
So we want to let listeners know that we now have a Patreon account. You can find us really easily. It's on the show notes and on our website.
Dr. Angela, what's Patreon?
Oh, people who listen to podcasts know what Patreon is. It's a way for you to help support us. If you can, podcasting is fun and we love every minute of it, but it does cost us some money.
If all you can afford to do is listen, we want you to listen. But if you can afford to send us a bit of financial support, we would love that as well.
And honestly, just even if you're not going to support us, I really, really want you to go to the Patreon page because I spent so much time on it and worked really hard to be creative and clever with the rewards using like psychological terms that I just really want to be validated for that.
Yeah, it's actually quite funny.
Even if you don't give us any money, just please tell me that you think the page is cool. That would be a lot to me.
But there are rewards for
Yes.
support, different
Yes.
levels of rewards.
Exactly. So anyway, thank you again, and we will see you soon. Today, Dr. Stephanie and I are really excited. We have Michael Schaffer, the host and creator of Reasonable Risk podcast, which is one of my new favorite podcasts. He's also the founder of Reason Real Estate. Michael brings 2 decades of business and negotiation experience to his roles. He has an interesting background. In the past, he was a small-time professional poker player and coach, and he cut his teeth in negotiations as a literary agent with a top LA talent agency. So we are delighted to have you today, Michael.
Well, I am thrilled to be here. I've been enjoying your shows. I think we started at about the same time. So our shows are about as old.
Well, one of the reasons I like your show so much is because you are bringing a sense of humor and a cynical eye to the way that we kind of go about our lives, making decisions, sometimes without really considering everything. So why don't you tell us what motivated you to start your podcast?
I think I might have to actually go back a little further than starting my podcast, because it really stems from becoming passionate about critical thinking. So that really goes back. A lot of it had to do with when I was playing poker professionally, and it taught me so much about how to look at probabilities and statistics and how those apply in different situations. And I started to see how those same things apply in decisions in life, and the same processes can be used. So that was really the start of my sort of critical thinking epiphany. And from there, I started getting into, also partially as a result of poker, I started getting into the atheist and skeptic communities and started listening to various podcasts in that genre, and started to get to know some people in that area. And from there, that was when I started to think, I think I could put together a podcast. I didn't know what it was. I was thinking about it for probably a year before it really hit me and took form.
I'm curious how poker led into atheism and cynicism and those kinds of things, or skepticism.
Well, I've always been a cynic. I think really what it was, and I was, I've never been religious, so it's not like there was some deconversion or anything like that. I was raised, basically secular Jewish.
Interesting.
Had my bar mitzvah, collected the checks, and since then I've only been in a temple for a relative's bar mitzvahs. But it really was more of a. I grew up really without the theology. It was more just cultural and ritual, and so in college I started to do the college thing of thinking about religion, and I took entry-level Eastern and Western religion and philosophy and that sort of thing. I was a business major. This wasn't like I wasn't pursuing it. It was just, the college intellectual exercise that I think a lot of us do. And so that had led me down that road much earlier. So where they came together actually was because of an act of Congress. In 2006, Congress passed what's called the UIGEA, which is the Unlawful Internet Gaming Enforcement Act of 2006. And it was done as a last-minute, middle-of-the-night, pushed-through thing by a couple of senators who were really doing it primarily for religious reasons of they didn't like gambling. And that actually impacted my livelihood, and it got me enraged. At the time, I was actually shifting politically. I had been I'd never voted, I don't think, at that point, because I was just apolitical. But I leaned more conservative, and it was at that point, it was in the early 2000s with George W. Bush that I sort of started flipping the switch towards where I am now, which I consider myself a very liberal progressive.
Wow, that's quite a shift.
Yeah, it is.
Although to some degree, the parties and the political landscape has shifted around us.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I could see myself being an Eisenhower Republican, but that's a lot different.
So one of the things that I wonder is, have you studied behavioral economics at all? And for those who don't know, behavioral economics is sort of the study of behavior in terms of investment. So for example, if you're standing in a line waiting for something, the more time you've invested in it, the more time you're likely to invest in it. So if you stand in a line for a long time, the longer you stay, you'll stay even longer because you're like, gosh darn it, I have been here and I am going to get my $2 cube of cream cheese or whatever it is.
You're invested in it.
Right.
And so I haven't, as a particular field of study, but in my MBA program we did, there was a lot of that interspersed throughout various courses that I took when I was at USC getting my MBA, and also in practice in doing hundreds of negotiations. I've definitely taken that psychological side of things and worked with it, thought about it, and worked in with study of game theory and that sort of thing. So yeah, absolutely. Actually, it's funny you mentioned the waiting in line. It's actually a corollary to the concept of a sunk cost, which I had done a segment on recently, where what you've put into something before does not affect what you should be thinking about going forward. You've got a car that you've had to repair 10 times, and you think, oh, I've put $5,000 into this car. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is what the state of it is now. So that's exactly it. It is behavioral economics, although I don't think those terms were used when I was in school.
Well, and it must have been something that you experienced as being a poker player, right? Because a lot of people keep playing even when they should walk away, right? Because they're going to make it back, of course.
Yeah, and that actually played a big role when I was coaching. So one of the things that I had done while I was playing, and I was a small stakes professional. I also didn't play many tournaments. So, people always say, oh, were you ever in a TV tournament? And no, I wasn't, because that wasn't the kind of thing that I did. But along with that, I produced some training videos through a site that doesn't exist anymore. But it was a big thing back then in the online poker world. There were several of these competing training sites, and so they would seek out people that could communicate well and knew what they were doing well enough to produce videos for them, and then to offer coaching services. And a lot of that did come down to working with my clients on how to slow down, think things through, have a process. And the absolute biggest thing was keeping the psychological factors in check. In poker, it's called going on tilt, when you've you've taken a big loss or something like that, and you play worse as a result of it, when again what happened before shouldn't affect your decisions going forward.
Well, you've done a lot of things like playing poker, working in real estate, that many people would consider risky. So tell us a bit about your risk journey and how you see risk has changed over time, or if it has.
I think that it has changed from the standpoint of becoming much more analytical about it and thinking about risk a little bit differently. So I try to never think of risk in isolation. So many people, when let's say they're making a real estate investment or something like that, their primary thought is going to be, what am I risking here? When it has to be taken and looked at in comparison to what the rewards are. That's the basis of any decision making. What are the risks? What are the rewards? You calculate it out, and calculating it, of course, you've got a million estimates in there. You can't know exactly what your outcomes are going to be. But as you do it more and more, you can get a feel for what the probabilities of different outcomes are. So that's how I make decisions now. Now, there are some things that fall outside of those bounds. I ride a motorcycle, which is extremely risky. I know that. The reward is I like it. And, maybe that's a calculation that, it would, and it is different for a lot of people. So there are places in your life where you have to get past the analysis. You can't just be a robot.
I think sometimes people don't realize how many areas of your life these risk assessments happen. And I'm thinking, for example, when I've worked with parents of kids who have attentional issues, and there's the question of medication. And parents talk a lot about the risks of medication. They've gone on the internet and seen all the side effects. And one thing that they've never or infrequently taken into account is the opportunity cost. There's might be risks to putting a child on medication, but there are risks to non-treatment.
Yes, absolutely.
Kids can really get behind socially. They can start to really hate school. A lot of problems.
I think it's a really good example of where people are terrible judges of risk. I mean, that's been proven through study after study. People are terrible judges of risk. So people key in on certain things that might be extremely infrequent things, but because they're listed in the the list of horribles, they'll key in on that. They'll say, there's a 1 in a million chance that this thing could cause death. I won't take that risk. When you have to look at the benefits of it, and you have to be able to say 1 in a million is really, it's not a risk I need to worry about.
Right. And we talked a little bit on the show that I was on with you with the idea that parents get overwhelmed with the worst thing that could happen to their child and don't really consider the kind of everyday things that, we're all taking a chance every time we get in our car, turn on the lights, eat food, breathe
air, which here where I am in Colorado has been very smoky lately. Everything out there, there's risks, but we don't say I'm not going to go outside of my house because I might get hit by a car. No, we still go out of our house. Some of those judgments that people make without even thinking about it, some of them are good and perfectly reasonable, like I'm going to get out of my house and drive to work today. And others aren't. When, say somebody is thinking, they have a 10-year-old who has never for 1 second been outside of their sight. They're probably not judging the risks that well.
And in fact, they're creating other problems.
Oh, yeah, of course. There's going to be other issues there. But everybody looks at them differently, too. Everybody has different risk profiles and different risk profiles in different areas of their lives. That's something that's it used to be that people would be thought of as risk averse or risk seeking, and it's becoming a lot more nuanced now, where even just some free online risk assessments that you can take that are, that they're worth about what you pay for them, but they're, provide maybe some interesting information, and they'll look at risks in different situations. Someone might be risk averse in social situations, but they might be risk seeking in financial situations.
Right. And this is it goes back to the poker. I always wondered this because I actually did play a little bit when you were allowed to do that on the internet as well. Mm-hmm. I nowhere near could have made small stakes or large stakes living on it because I was horrible at it, except when it was play money. Then I was phenomenal.
Okay. And it's an interesting observation. So I have a lot of friends that have, they'll play on Play Money or whatever sites for fun. And that's great. That's all well and good. Have fun. It's not actually the game of poker. Even though the mechanics are the same, the game requires stakes to be at risk. And if there aren't stakes at risk, the game doesn't work. So the free games, people don't have a sense of loss
Right.
if they lose. So it changes the dynamic so greatly that I really advise people that if they're ever going to be playing for money, never play for no money.
That's
because
fascinating.
it really will reinforce terrible behaviors and strategies.
Like, I can go all in on a 7-2. Of course I can. Why can't I?
You can do anything you want, but that's probably not going to be optimal. And that's really all about the way that I would teach poker and how that thinking started to apply to other areas of life was thinking through what's the optimal decision, and also what's the path. What are the next 3 decisions going to look like as a result of this one? So, looking ahead, which, great chess players, they see, 8 moves ahead or that sort of thing. It's a little different with poker or with life, because those are games or areas, I guess, of life where you have imperfect information. As opposed to chess, you have perfect information. Both players know exactly where every piece is, and there's nothing hidden. But in poker, in a negotiation, in life, you don't know. You don't have all the information. No one person has all of the cards.
So another thing I wanted to ask you about was you had made a reference on one of your earlier shows about the fact that in the last few years you had become, and I forget exactly how you phrased it, but kind of more aware of social justice issues and inequality and things like that. I'm curious about that.
Sort of the journey of moving
what
towards that.
Yeah, what do you mean by that? Like that you became more aware, and what prompted that?
Well, a lot of it did actually come from a lot of the atheist and skeptical podcasts that I was already listening to. And so as sort of the frenzy of the gay marriage issue sort of came to a peak, and then ultimately was decided with the Obergefell case, that was a thing that those podcasters started talking a lot about. And I, having worked in Hollywood for many years, I have lots of gay friends. Some of them were married in California or wherever state. And it was one of those issues that I was already, I didn't need to be convinced on that. So from there, then then the Obergefell decision comes out. Okay, great. We're not fighting over gay marriage anymore. I mean, of course we are, but at least that was settled in that way. And then a lot of the same people started to talk about things like Black Lives Matter became a big topic, trans rights, things like that. And so people that I respected for their thinking skills were talking about these things that were in the news, and they were making a lot of sense to me, as opposed to the people that, the side that was saying, the All Lives Matter, or the Blue Lives Matter, or the people against the Occupy movements, or anything like that. So as these people that I thought of as really good thinking people are making these cases for social justice, for, basically, a recognition of different levels of privilege and non-privilege, it made a lot of sense to me. And I thought through those issues critically. And the conclusion I came to was that the only rational answer, not that it's an answer, but that the only rational decision is to be in favor of greater equality, greater assistance to rectify inequalities, And, made me think about my own level of privilege, which is very high. I mean, I'm a heterosexual white dude who, grew up in a relatively affluent suburb. So I've got all the privilege. And I hadn't necessarily thought about it that much prior to that. So when I started thinking about it critically, and now it's very much in the news that there's a bit of a culture war in a sense, and my thought process and my critical thinking leads me to the only rational and reasonable position is to be in favor of trying to limit inequalities.
So when you talk about inequality and privilege, how do you think calculation of reasonable risk works differently for different people who have different levels of having or not having privilege?
Oh, it works very differently. I mean, to just look at the news and the again, kind of going back to Black Lives Matter, there's pretty clearly right now a greater risk of driving while black than driving while white. We need to be recognizing that, and it also ties into the drug war. The drug war has been used now for 40 years to put people in prison. I mean, that's all it's done. It's just put people in prison and hurt communities that were already underprivileged. So items like that, yeah, there are way different risks depending on who you are. You take your person like me, or your relatively privileged person who has lawyers they can call, has the ability to pull out a credit card if something happens. The risks of failure in different things become very low, whereas somebody that doesn't have those privileges, the risks of failure from one endeavor could be really high.
Right. And then I know you recently had some people on talking about issues around social justice and criminal policing.
Yeah, with incarceration.
And
with incarceration in particular. And that's sort of a different piece of it, which is it's just really a different way of saying privilege, to use the term moral luck, which comes from the philosopher Nagel. And it essentially, you can boil it down in a way to people, for the most part, are not responsible for their circumstances. There are so many things that weigh much more heavily on where a person is in life than the decisions they've made to get there. And you see that in decreased class mobility, which has been declining in the U.S. We always, as Americans, we always thought that it was the Europeans that, stayed within their classes. But now that's an American phenomenon too. You're not that likely, if you're born in the lowest 20% of wealth in the country, you're very unlikely to make it up even to the middle quintile.
Right.
Yeah, and education has a big piece to do with that, and the cost of education, although that's probably far afield from our topic today.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, though. Education does matter greatly, because educational outcomes are very well correlated to income.
But I think it's interesting, and it does tie to the issue of, as you said, that people are really bad at assessing risk, is that people are really bad at assessing, where they are and how they got there too. I mean, try to convince someone that they didn't do it all themselves. And it's like a personal affront to them. And it's like, nobody's saying you didn't work hard. Nobody's saying you didn't apply yourself. Nobody's saying you didn't take advantage of the circumstances in which you found yourself. But
Right.
to say
but you
that,
started on third base instead
Exactly.
of starting at home plate. Yeah, and that's, we see that all the time when, if you go back to the whole you didn't build that, yes we built that thing, the from the Obama Romney race. Of course, what President Obama was saying was, there other people helped because you didn't build all the roads to your factory yourself, and there is something greater within the society that we've built that. The ideal is, the society should be greater than the sum of the parts, especially with, I see this a lot with, I get into fun online arguments in private groups with, libertarians or people that really don't think that society provides any benefits, that everybody should, be out for themselves. And I don't think that works as well. I think everybody is worse off if there isn't some collaboration. Doesn't mean, I'm not talking about common ownership or anything like that. Just, a societal pact in the way that we had, until the Reagan era.
People forget about things like infrastructure.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, we hear about infrastructure, crumbling infrastructure, but nobody thinks about that's what the taxes do.
Right.
So, they want no taxes and better infrastructure. That's actually something I face in the county that I live in, which is an affluent county that really doesn't like to pay taxes. So everybody likes to complain about the roads, but they don't want to pay for them.
right. And it just, in some ways it's so frustrating, because we just went through a whole political debate about why certain people shouldn't have to pay medical insurance or contribute to medical insurance for people who are sicker than them or who get pregnant when they don't or whatever. And now we have, these significant weather events that are happening in certain parts of the country where, guess what? We're all going to chip in and help for that, because that's the way it works in a society. It's like, well, there's no rain where I am. So, nobody would make that argument, right? But that's what insurance is. That's what government is.
Well, right. Absolutely. That's what insurance is. The whole concept of we shouldn't have healthy people paying for sick people, that it makes no sense. That's exactly what insurance does. I pay for my car insurance. I don't wreck my car every day. I'm paying for someone else's wreck. That's what insurance is. And I think that does loop back into the concept of thinking critically currently, but also thinking a few moves ahead. I think that if we were all better at thinking about consequences and weighing them against costs, that we would all be better off for it. If somehow I could snap my fingers and people just started to think about every decision for an extra second, it would start to get there. Every little bit, I think starts to improve things. And I think it really is a matter of taking the time to just think about things. I mean, maybe it's I'm not generally an optimist, so it's a little bit strange for me to say this, but I think that if people on the other political side from myself, I think if they spent more time thinking things through, that they, like I did, would change views.
So you've talked a lot about the evolution of your views. How has being a father and becoming a father changed your view of what is reasonable risk?
Good question. So my kids are school age. So I've been been a father for about a decade, which kind of mirrors that path. I would say that it has increased my empathy. It's increased my awareness and consideration for the future with regards to both the political situation and the environment. I'm not an environmentalist. I don't even recycle in my own house, but I do think that we need some big things to change as far as what is happening with climate.
Interesting. That's one of the focuses that came out for you as you're raising your kids. Those really big issues.
It's one of those things that I guess it coincides with having kids. I think it's mostly to the extent of, it forces you to think beyond your lifespan. And when you start thinking one generation beyond your lifespan, I think that the next step is you think 2 generations ahead. Looking at the science, 2 generations from now doesn't look very good for a lot of places. I mean, I'm in Colorado. There isn't going to be an ocean overcoming me here, but
yeah, you're pretty high up, so that's good.
But I also don't like the idea of massive droughts that are causing wildfires that are 2 states away that I can breathe in here because there's so many of them. So I do think that it has impacted my scale or my scope of what I would think about. I don't think I had actually thought that much about really the future. In some ways, I guess you call me like a nihilist or something, but because I just didn't really think much past myself. Yeah, but I think that you have to, as a human, as a humanist, and I consider myself a humanist. I think
it's funny because I think the wisdom used to be that you get more conservative as you get older. But
right.
My experience
Absolutely.
is actually completely the opposite. I've gotten much more liberal and progressive as I've gotten older, and it sounds like that's also been true for you, and it's true for a lot of people that I know.
And I think that is the old saying was always, if you're not a liberal when you're 20, you have no soul, or if you're not a conservative by 40, you have no brain. I think that was what it was.
I remember people saying that.
And you're right. I do see a shift in that. So I'm 42, and I think in my sort of Gen X generation, we are seeing a lot of movement towards the liberal side. I think a lot of that does have to do with, and this was the reason I started on the path to liberalism. I didn't start with the economics of it. I started with the social part of it. I started with being frustrated with, anti-gay rhetoric and anti-immigrant and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I also think, I'm also Gen X. My co-host is Gen X. And I think, having grown up with the threat of being, bombed to oblivion, and then, going through the 90s and, the economic turmoil and now the climate issues, I feel like our generation really
got screwed.
Has been under the weight of some really big existential angst, with regard to things.
We're also the first full generation that has a very low percentage of people with pensions. That is a big shift from the boomers. A lot of the boomers, were still in you work for one place for 20 to 30 years and then you get a nice pension. Hardly any of our generation is in that situation, unless they're maybe military or that sort of thing. But that's really changed things, because we've had to think differently about retirement, which I think for many of us, it's thinking, well, guess that's never going to happen.
Exactly. And then we got married later and had our kids later. So now it's like,
yes,
we can either put our kids through college or we can retire. So there's that.
Well, there's actually a podcaster that I like who has been on my show too, Phil Ferguson, and he's an investment advisor. And one of the things that he advises is don't save for your kids' college. Put it in your retirement instead. And it's I won't go through all of the stuff. You can easily find it in his shows, which is just called the Phil Ferguson Show. But he makes a very good case for why that makes financial sense. And it has to do with financial aid formulas and taxes and all sorts of things. But yeah, I just found that so interesting because the common wisdom is, set up that 529. I mean, I have one. I have a 529 for my kids. It's hard not to feel like you need to. You don't want to be. I mean, I know I don't want to be in that situation of having to restrict choices. I mean, unless they get a scholarship, they're not going to USC for their undergrad. But I was provided with my undergrad education. I didn't have to take out loans or anything. Again, that's a lot of privilege. And, I would like for that same thing to be true for my kids if possible.
Well, you've done a nice job plugging Phil's show, but I want to give you a chance to plug your own because, we love your podcast and we should probably be wrapping up. But this has been terrific. I really have wanted to talk to you about many of these things, and I'm never playing poker for no money ever again. So, but
it's perfectly fine to do that as long as you are not thinking of it as poker.
Oh,
it's more actually the equivalent of playing like an online slot machine. That's the way that I think of it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So my show is a Reasonable Risk. We have released, 9 or 10 episodes. I can't remember which one came out yesterday. So new episodes every Wednesday morning at 12:01 a.m. Mountain Time, because nobody ever quotes anything in Mountain Time.
Oh.
And so I am going to do it. I say, hey, it comes out. You can figure out from Mountain Time when it comes out in your area. It's available on everywhere: iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and the website is reasonableriskpodcast.com. You can get the RSS feed from there. Also, I wanted to just let any of your listeners know, if you have questions about anything that you heard here, feel free to email me. It's reasonableriskpodcast@gmail.com, or tweet at me @reasonbroker is my Twitter.
And you, as you mentioned on your show, if people have real estate questions, you're always willing to field those as well.
Absolutely. That I do. So I own my own brokerage, which I set up Reason Real Estate specifically to implement the thought processes, the analysis, the critical thinking, and the client skills that I have learned mainly through Hollywood. Believe me, working with studios and talent is not the easiest thing in the world.
See, that sounds like a whole other conversation
really
we may have to have at some point.
I would be happy to do that, because there is. Oh, actually, you know what? That would be a lot of fun, because there's a whole lot of different things involving the mind that are prevalent in Hollywood. Both good and bad. So that would be a really fun topic.
Okay, well, we'll have to have you back to talk about that. That'd be great.
Definitely. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on your show. I have been enjoying it, and so I am looking forward to hearing more from you two. I think you guys are doing great.
It's been great for us as well.
Thank you for listening to Chasing the Mind. Today's episode featured music from purpleplanet.com. Please visit our website at chasingthemind.com, where you can find links to the Reasonable Risk podcast. You can listen to past episodes and read about upcoming guests and events. And you can find our link to our Patreon page.